Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tier 2 Talk, the Australia Championship. I'm your host, Keane McKenna, and it's a pleasure to have you back for another week. A lot has happened over the course of a week, and we're getting back into these weekly style podcast episodes to keep you up to date, especially coming the end of August here, the end of winter, and especially with just over a month left until the Australia Championship kicks off for year number 2. It's a pleasure to have you all. If you're first time, welcome. If you're a returner, welcome back. If you like these episodes or like what we do here at Tier 2 Talk, make sure you drop a follow here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you're listening to. Or if you want more daily content, head to our Instagram or Twitter at Tier 2 Talk _TAC. That's where you can find all the latest info and especially news regarding the Australia Championship as it comes available, and hopefully that will be coming soon over the next few weeks, especially with the end of the NPL seasons, the end of the Australia Cup, and the Australia Championship kicking off in just over a month's time. So it's an exciting time. We have all 16 teams confirmed. That's going to be the first point we talk about here today. We're going to follow that up by talking about some not so good news and the realization that Sydney Olympic have been relegated from the NPL New South Wales competition. That was confirmed last weekend, so we'll talk about what that means for the Australia Championship Foundation Club and the club more in general going forward. We also have another special guest coming onto the show today. Here's the head coach of Adelaide City, the newly crowned premiers of NPL South Australia, Vas Parhas. He will be joining us a little bit to talk about, the return of Adelaide City back to the national competition. He was once a former player of Adelaide City, so we'll talk to him about, what it means to bring the club that he's played for in the old NSL back into the Australia Championship and, winning the NPL South Australia in what was a very, very tight race throughout the whole season. After the interview, we'll talk about the Australia Cup and the quarterfinal fixtures. 3 have been played. We have one more tonight, and arguably it's the biggest out of the lot, South Melbourne Preston. We'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll talk about the dream, or my dream, Australia Championship groups. Now that we know all 16 teams, I thought it'd be time to, talk about who would make the most interesting matchups, who we'd like to see pair against each other in these group formats, and then go from there. And then you guys can also share your thoughts as we post that later in the week. So that is the episode that we're going to have for you today. So I hope you all are excited for that. I hope you are interested in these topics. If you want any topics talked about, just message on Instagram or Twitter, or reach out on those platforms. Tell us what you want to hear and the conversations you want to have as well. So, starting with the news that broke over the weekend, it was a very busy Saturday evening with 4 teams qualifying for the Australia Championship. We now have all 16 teams confirmed for this year's Australia Championship. So, we have the 8 foundation clubs of South Melbourne, West Apia, Wollongong Wolves, Sydney United, Sydney Olympic, Avondale, Preston Lions, and the Marconi Stallions as the foundation clubs. They will be joined by 4 returning clubs, those being Canberra, Croatia, Bayswater City, Broadmeadow Magic, and South Hobart. And then they will be joined by 4 brand new teams making their debut on the national stage in the national second tier: Adelaide City, Oakley Cannon, the Sutherland Sharks, and Lions FC. So I think that's a really good and strong Australia Championship for this season. It does have that mix of new clubs coming into it, and that's the beauty of having these premiers join. Every year can be different, and you especially get some historic clubs like a Lions FC, like an Adelaide City, back onto the national stage. Clubs that were on the National Soccer League competition back when that was running during the late half of the 20th century. They rejoin in a new modern competition. We also have the returners of a Bayswater, of a Broadmeadow, teams that have exhibit their strength statewide, domestically. They get to show their talents and have another opportunity on the national stage. So it's a great and fantastic achievement for them. And I'm really excited about the teams that have come on board as well. Though, to talk about, how they all qualified, especially the teams over the weekend, it was a very chaotic situation for some. Others were very straightforward. The straightforward situations were, say, Bayswater City. They just needed to draw or win against Perth Glory. It was basically already wrapped up, but mathematically, that's what they had to do, and they did just that. Comfortable 2-0 win over Perth Glory, secured back-to-back premierships for Bayswater there, and so they will be back on the national stage. They didn't make it out of the group stage last year, missing out just on the final day of the group stages, so hopefully they will be trying to make it out of the groups this time around. Another team that had a very straightforward weekend was Canberra Croatia. They had a 4-0 win over Belconnen, and they needed to do so as Monroe Panthers, who were just less than 3 points behind them at the time of kickoff, they also had a big 5-0 win. And, you go back the week prior in where Canberra Croatia scored that 93rd minute winner against the Panthers, that ultimately will go down as the premiership decider there. If they don't score that goal, then the Panthers remain on top of the NPL ACT competition there, tied on points but better goal difference. And, you would have been saying Monroe Panthers could be in this position and playing on the national stage. However, Canberra Croatia scored late, and now they will be returning to the Australia Championship. Oakley Cannons, they also had a very straightforward path to qualification. However, it was anything but in their game against Dandenong Thunder. Dandenong Thunder already relegated from the NPL Victoria competition, and Oakley ended up winning 5-0 on the night. However, they had an over 30 to 40 minute delay between half-time because of a power outage. I was, trying to keep up to date with the scores on the Saturday evening, and went into halftime break. Oakley were up 1 or 2 goals at that point. But then when I checked back in, the stadium lights were off. They were delayed, and then by the time the game restarted, the live stream ended. So it was anything but straightforward for Oakley Cannons. It was good that, the outage didn't affect them, and that they went on and, ended up putting up a big score against Dandenong Thunder. So that's their first premiership win since 2021. So the Oakley Cannons will be on the national stage, and I think from what I've heard, I don't know too much about the club personally, but I've heard their facilities down at Oakley are one of the best in Victoria, newly upgraded grandstand there. So I think it will be really good opportunity to have them display themselves on a national stage for a national audience. And then finally, Sutherland Sharks needed a win over St. George City to secure their spot. A draw wouldn't have done it. They needed a win. And, they're up 2-0, looking very comfortable going into the final 20 minutes, quarter of an hour. But then St. George City got one back. They weren't going to lie down and rest. They pushed Sutherland all the way. And dramatically, if you want to watch the highlights back, I was watching this one live. So it's, say, 94th minute. Daniel Nizic, keeper for Sutherland Sharks, caught the ball like a cross, caught it, went down onto his knees, as all goalkeepers do, time wasting, walking out to the edge of box, taking all 8 seconds that the referee gave him. But as he went to kick the 8 seconds, the referee actually blew him up and awarded St. George City with a corner for like a time violation thing. And then following the corner, it swung in towards the back post. There's a header from St. George City or a kick on goal, on target, and there were massive appeals from St. George City regarding a handball. Now, the commentator and the live stream footage, it was hard to see if there was a handball there or not from the vantage point. However, St. George City were adamant that there were, and then literally straight after that handball appeal, the ball was cleared away and the full-time whistle was blown. So they just scraped through Sutherland. Yes, they still have one game to go of the regular season this weekend, but they did not make it easy for themselves. St. George City did push them all the way. However, as the picture became clearer in New South Wales for the Oz Championship spot and who was going to take it, I'm really happy that Sutherland were that team. They've been doing a fantastic job in terms of rebuilding their brand and, the identity of that club. I was down there round 2 of the NPL season, and I think since then they've only done bigger and greater things. And if you give them one of the foundation clubs from out of state, or you give them some big matchups down in the Shire, I think it's going to be a fantastic place to watch some national tier footy. And it was like teams like this that deserve the opportunity to go on the national stage and show what they're made of. Because we see it in New South Wales, and I'm excited for the rest of the country to see what the Sutherland Sharks can offer, and what they have been offering throughout the season. So that is it. That is all 16 teams into the Australia Championship. Let me know what your thoughts are on all 16 teams, whether it was better, whether it was worse than last year's competition, last year's output of 16 teams. Let me know who you're most excited to see on the national stage, who you want your team to be paired up against, or what, derbies or rivalries you want to see ignited back on a national stage, or for the first time on a national stage. Now, with all this good news about the Oz Championship being decided and the 16 teams being announced, there were some very sad and unfortunate news that came out over the weekend, and that was the relegation confirmation of Sydney Olympic down from NPL New South Wales to Football New South Wales League One. They lost 1-0 to Marconi Stallions over the weekend, another Australia Championship Foundation club. And the 1-0 loss confirmed that Sydney Olympic will finish last this year, 16th out of 16th, and will go down to the lower leagues of the New South Wales Pyramid for the first time in club history. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversation about this throughout the season, but now especially more since their relegation. It's very unfortunate news for the historic club. There's some good people there at the club that have been putting in a lot of work to try and, turn around what was a derailed train or a ship destined to fail. And they put in a lot of work, but ultimately, I think if you know anything about the off-field drama at the start of the year with their ownership group, they didn't have the best situation or fallout. The fallout was very big between the past owners leaving the club, or if they did leave the club, a lot of confusion around that situation, and it just made the back room very messy. And having a very messy back room, it led to an on-field product that was unable to, overcome all those incidents. So, yes, they will be in the second tier of New South Wales next year. They will still be competing in the Australia Championship this year as a foundation club. They were promised, a spot in this year's Oz Championship. See what they can do, in this year's competition. I'm, from what I know about Sydney Olympic, I've seen their fans aren't happy with this. They know that the back room is a mess. They would much rather not be in the Australia Championship this year, or some of them at least don't want to be in the Australia Championship because, they feel that opportunity is what kind of started this whole turmoil. And yeah, it's just a very negative and sad mood around Olympic. They could completely come into this Oz Championship and, do wonders for the club and show a real fight and a backbone, or it could just be a continuation of their NPL season, and they just kind of crash out of this tournament and then just head into a Football New South Wales league that is very competitive and one that is tough to get out of. If you know anything about the Bankstown City Lions, they invested heavily this year to get out of League One, up promoted into the NPL New South Wales, again another historic club of the state. And they had all this money, signed all these really good players, and they're only finishing third. And when you only have one automatic spot and one spot via the playoff, it does make for a very tricky scenario to get out of for Olympic. And hopefully it is a 1 year down, 1 year up, just like the Melbourne Knights have done in in Victoria, I should say, VPL 1. They went down last year, played in VPL this year, and then they've come back up. So they, resurged really quickly. So that was good to see from Melbourne Knights. Hopefully Sydney Olympic can do the same. But I think first, it's not a matter of on-field product. It's a matter of sorting out that back room and trying to heal a lot of fractions within the club and then trying to go forward from there. They did release a statement to their footballing community on Facebook the other day. It says, "It is a hard result to accept for a club with our history and standing in Australia football. We know this news lands heavily on everyone who has stood behind the club. Ultimately, we have not repaid that support. The plain truth is that we have not been good enough. We now must face the consequences of the failure with honesty, transparency, and a determination to repair, refocus, and rebuild. We will be back. Our commitment to this club, this badge, this community does not change because of where we finish on the ladder. We have listened, we have taken responsibility, we have identified where change was needed, and those changes are being implemented. We're already turning our full attention to preparing a squad and program capable of returning Sydney Olympic to the NPL at the first opportunity, with renewed energy, stronger structures, and clear vision for the future." And then thank yous to members, supporters for their loyalty. And they finish off by saying, "This is a setback, not the end of the story. We ask every member of Sydney Olympic family to stand with us as we begin the work of coming back stronger. Thank you for those who have reached out with all support. We will be back together. Sydney Olympic Football Club." So yeah, I think it's a very sad situation for Sydney Olympic, but the cards and signs have been written on the walls for quite a while. It looked like they were going to save their way out of relegation there, probably at start or mid-July, but form just couldn't stay, and they ultimately are going down. It does make things interesting moving forward regarding the Australia Championship and their place in it. I know they're a foundation club, and I doubt that will go anywhere, and this is just me speculating, but I imagine if there's any change to the Oz Championship, they will still be a part of it. And by change, I mean if it goes to like a home and away season, league format, that kind of thing, I still imagine they'll be a part of it in some capacity. But you just don't know about the club or where the Oz Championship is going. But yeah, that's the latest on Sydney Olympic, and we'll be reporting about any news we hear regarding them, especially moving forward into the Oz Championship and then into Football New South Wales League One next year as well. We'll be covering that all next year, and hopefully they'll be rising back up and promoted back to the NPL as soon as possible. Now we'll cut to our interview with Vas from Adelaide City. It's a fantastic interview, so I hope you all enjoy that one. And let me know your thoughts at the end of the interview. So I hope you enjoy. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. And we are now joined for our special guest interview of the week. We are joined by Adelaide City's head coach this time around. It is Vas Parhas. Vas, thank you very much for joining the show. And how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, no, very good, thank you. Really appreciate you having me on board, and appreciate the work you do in the local football scene as well, Keen. It's greatly appreciated, mate, giving us a lot of coverage and a lot of support, and it means a lot to a lot of people. So I want to say thank you to you straight off the bat.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much for that. But if I can return the compliment, I first have to say congratulations on winning the NPL Premiership with Adelaide City this season. Was covering that very closely. How do you feel about winning that achievement, getting over the line with City this season?
Yeah, very proud. Incredibly proud. It was a close run race the entire year. Very, very tight NPL season in South Australia. I think it was one of the tightest seasons in recent memory. And it went down to that very last game. So incredibly proud, relieved as well. Big year for the club, our 80th year. So to win silverware, return the club to the national stage. I think it's been 24, it might be 24, almost a quarter of a century since we were on the national stage in the NSL back in 2002-03. It is a huge privilege, a huge honour, and incredibly proud of the entire club. The entire club, just stoked.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect answer to start our interview off. A lot of the points you talked about in your answer then is a lot of the questions I have. if I could touch on one, you talked about, the close race that NPL South Australia was this year. I was going back through, our posts throughout the season and, the check mark points at the end of the month. And, you had yourselves, Metro Stars, Playford City, West Torrens, all hosting top spot in the league throughout the season. How were you able to keep your side focused on, your job at hand and not really focusing on what the other teams were doing, even though they were keeping up to pace with yourselves and going up and down the table positions?
Yeah, it was super interesting because of that dynamic of that constant shift, and that can come with a bit of a change in your mindset and your mentality. So we really broke the season down into essentially 3 or 4 games at a time, and we just set small goals within each of those. We called them our climbs. So we literally had a visual of a mountain, and we had stages, and each game was a stage of our climb, and there was a unique challenge with each of those climbs. And we made sure that every single week we were not just focusing on the opposition and what they would bring in terms of a challenge for us, but also where we needed to be better. And it was that, for us, a growth mindset. We worked a lot on our mentality about looking at how can we be better, what are the things that we need to do to constantly be better, regardless of who we're playing. And by keeping ourselves to a sort of a 3 or 4 game block, we were able to set some short-term goals and then reevaluate, reset, and almost essentially start the climb again. We talked about starting the climb again. And we were in a position at one point where we were hunting. And so I think that's an easier mindset in a way to be in, where you've got a goal, an aspiration, a clear target. We had Metro, Becalla, at one point Playford, and we were chasing them down. And there was that real sense of hunger to reel them in. And then with 4 or 5 games left, we became the hunted. And we talked openly about what that meant from a mindset perspective. And it was for us about, that's exactly where we wanted to be. And that's the target we'd set ourselves all year. So let's embrace that. Let's embrace the pressure that comes with that. And let's really prove to everyone why we're there and that we deserve to be there and keep pushing the envelope. So we did a lot of work on our mindset, on our mentality, reevaluating, resetting goals constantly, keeping a growth mindset the whole season. And I could not be prouder of the way that the playing group, that the staff, that the entire club approached that. To go 14 games, I think it was, undefeated, leading into that round 22, that final game, which included, I think, 4 or 5 clean sheets in a row, 10 clean sheets for the year, 16 goals conceded in 22 games. The team was stoic. They put the bit between the teeth. The staff were amazing. The entire club was incredibly supportive. And so, I just could not be prouder of how the entire club approached the challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting getting that insight from inside the club and how you approach that season, because you just mentioned some of the stats that I was just about to read off. It speaks for themselves. 2 losses throughout the season, best attack and defense in the league, and undefeated in the league since May. You talk about that 14 game undefeated streak. Was there a certain point in that streak that you thought, personally, whether you shared it with the team or not, but you thought, all right, that's the turning point. We've, turned that point, and, you fully believe that you could go on and fight for this premiership all the way through?
Yeah, there were a couple of little points, actually, Keen. The first one was we got knocked out of the Australia Cup, and we were very open in saying that one of our ambitions was to qualify for the round of 32, and we got knocked out. We didn't get there, and we were bitterly disappointed. I can't explain how disappointed we were. We think we probably underachieved. And I just saw, rather than a team that was deflated and negative and down on themselves, I saw a real fire in the belly, and I saw a real spark in the eyes of the players. And I knew at that point that this team had what it took from a resilience perspective, from a mindset perspective, to put that aside, reset, and push on in earnest towards our other goal, which was to qualify for the Australian Championship. So that was one turning point, and I think the second one for me was we've had some adversity with injury. We lost two key defenders during the year. Lewis Kylo, one of the best young centre-backs in the country, got injured in round two and hasn't played since. And then Noah Smith, who ex-A-League player, been brilliant for the club since he came last year. He unfortunately did his ACL in round 8. And to have lost two extremely important players for us, could have been a real turning point and could have really disrupted the team. But players adapted very quickly. They were able to adjust to new positions. They were able to adjust to a slightly new way of playing, and got on with the job and rose to another level. And when I saw that 3 or 4 games in, post losing Noah in particular, I just knew that this team had it in them to grapple with tough moments and overcome them. And that's what you, as a coach, any coach wants to see in their team, is a fight, a resilience, the ability to overcome adversity. When you've got that in a team, then more often than not, you can go on to achieve some good things. So those were the 2 points in the season for me that I thought, yep, this group can do something special.
Okay. Now, talking about your team and your squad for this season, I'd like to take a step back and talk about your journey to having the head coach job at Adelaide City. Doing a bit of research before this interview, I found out that you had an illustrious playing career, over 300 senior games. A lot of that football came in South Australia football, a strong presence there. Guide us through your journey, your achievements, and how the opportunity arrived at Adelaide City at the start of last year.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've had just been blessed to have been able to play a lot of football here in the NPL in South Australia. I've been able to play under some incredible coaches and with some incredible players. And that, for me, that football's always been my passion. It's been my love. To be able to do it for a long period of time as a player was a real privilege. And I knew, probably towards the end of 2015, 16, that were my last 2 years playing, I knew that I wanted to coach. Leadership is also a passion of mine. It's something I've always enjoyed doing. It's what I do away from football in my kind of day job, if you like. I've got a real passion for that. So the kind of blending the two together, my two passions made absolute perfect sense. And I think back on some of the influences for me, when I was a young man at the South Australian Sports Institute, I was lucky enough to have the likes of the late Martin Crook coaching. And I think back now, I think some of the things that we were doing back then in the sort of mid-90s with athletic performance and strength and conditioning and pushing the boundaries, he was well ahead of his time on that front. And then I sort of was able to go into a senior environment at Adelaide City and played in the state league side when I left the Institute of Sport and was coached by the famous and great Serge Melter, one of Adelaide City's and Australia's best ever players and former Socceroo. And he really opened my eyes to what it meant to push to be a professional footballer. And then sort of worked my way through the NPL into various senior sides, and again was lucky to be coached by one of the best players to have ever played here in South Australia, Zoran Karadzic, who coached at Blue Eagles, or Azuri as it was known back then. And he was a special footballer, multiple trophy winning coach. And now thinking about it, some of the things he was teaching us around relationism and some of the tactical nous that he had, I know that influenced me, even though I didn't realise it at the time. And then towards the last sort of 8 or 9 years of my playing career at Campbelltown, I was incredibly fortunate to have the amazing Joe Mullen as a coach and a mentor, and I continue to receive mentorship from Joe to this day. He is one of the most successful coaches ever in South Australia. Has won multiple trophies. Did the treble. I was lucky enough to be his assistant in 2018 when we won the league, won the championship, and won the Australian championship. And his attention to detail, his ability to get the best out of people, his ability to connect people to a purpose. These are things that to this day have shaped who I am, not just as a coach, but also as a human being. And so I consider that to be a pivotal moment for me to have experienced playing under Joe, and then to be his assistant for a couple of years, really continue to ignite that fire for me to want to be a coach. And then moved into the NTC environment where I supported Carl Viet when he was the NTC coach. And then he moved on to Adelaide United, and Ayrton Andrioli was the NTC coach, and I was his assistant before we moved into the NPL environment, and was lucky enough to assist Ayrton, and we won the league in 2023 with the Adelaide United youth team. And Ayrton, who now, as everyone would know, is already achieving success as an A-League coach, as I knew he would. His tactical nous, his strategy, his ability to read the play, his ability to help players to do things that they probably didn't think they were capable of doing is absolutely second to none. And he's been an inspiration for me, and a lot of the foundations that I have in my coaching structure have come from learning under Ayrton. So I've been incredibly blessed, and I'm extremely grateful for all of these amazing people and coaches who have given me their time and their expertise. And I guess that for me is a big part of who I am and why I'm coaching to this day.
Yeah, and it's great to hear all those little stories, because I think those little stories that, make up who we see today in the limelight of Australian football, they get lost kind of thing. So, yeah, it's really cool to hear, how even your time as a player is now influencing this new generation of Adelaide City players and what you've been able to achieve in your short tenure at the club. Now, with securing the state premiership comes the qualification to this year's Australia Championship. You've already touched on it a little bit, but could you explain further, for the club, for its rich supporter base, for yourself, for the many people around the country that feel Adelaide City should be on this stage, what does it mean to bring the club back onto a national stage?
It means absolutely everything. This is our 80th year as a club, so we are a historic club. And in our constitution, it actually says that we, as a club, we should be playing in the highest level of competition available to us. And at this point in time, it is the second tier. So for us, this is something that this is our ambition as a club, is to be performing at the very highest level that we can. The club, as many people on listening in would know, is one of the most successful clubs in this country. 3 NSL championships, 3 NSL cups. I think second only in terms of championships to South Melbourne, Marconi, and I think it might be Sydney City with 4 each. The most amount of cups. We've won 20 South Australian titles, 18 cups. 50 plus Socceroos have played at Adelaide City. Some of the greatest players to have ever graced a Socceroos shirt. This is a club that means something to South Australians. It means something to Australians more broadly, and there's such a rich history, and there is such a history of success. There's a legacy that the club has of joining and connecting, providing community, providing support. It is such an important, integral part of the South Australian football fabric that there was no other choice but to strive to play in this Australian Championship because of those things. As a club, we expect to win titles. We expect to win trophies. We understand that is Adelaide City. That is why we are at Adelaide City, because we align with that ambition as coaches, as players. But we also appreciate that we are now building the club towards something for the future. So, our president, Ange Carrozza, who is an amazing leader, is one of the most strategic, ambitious and supportive people I've ever worked with in football. I know his ambition is to continue building a club that retains that sense of pride and that connection to its history. But at the same time, we want to welcome new players, new families. We want to connect businesses. We want to bring new fans into the club, because we are a club that values diversity as well. And we're an inclusive club. We're a progressive club. We have a long-term ambition to be a professional football club again. And being in this second division for us is demonstrating that we have the people at the club who can do it. We have the ambition at the club, and we hope that this will provide that belief and kickstart that next step for us to once again become a professional football club, whenever that might be.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think one of the things that have been sentiment around what I've seen on Tier 2 and just the wider footballing community is that excitement that Adelaide City is back on a stage like this. For myself and others who didn't get to see the NSL when Adelaide City were, one of the biggest clubs in South Australia, seeing them back on this stage, it's something that really excites me about this coming year, and the Australia Championship and the opportunity that it brings, like you talked about, to unite people together, but then also show these historic clubs progressing into new generations and new markets of football and the wider community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredibly important competition, and there are so many clubs, the likes of Marconi, the likes of South Melbourne and Preston and Apia. The list just goes on and on and on, who have incredibly rich histories and played such an important part in many cases, new migrants without coming to a new country who didn't speak the language, who had really very little support and were trying to build a better life. These football clubs were the cornerstone of these families and these communities, and to see them grow and flourish and achieve success and renew themselves in today's society is really special, and something we should celebrate as a country, because it makes us better. It makes our footballing landscape better. We're producing fantastic young players from these NPL clubs who are going on and representing clubs in the A-League, and then you can see how good our young players are. They're now going overseas and doing wonderful things. These young men and women are all products of the NPL and the amount of work that goes into running a strong NPL club. So, it's vital from a community perspective. It's also vital from a footballing perspective for this country to continue to support our NPL clubs so they can flourish and continue producing, fantastic footballers.
1000%, and I can't agree with you more. The next question I had was to talk about, some of those clubs that you mentioned. You played at Adelaide City during the 90s, saw, Marconi, Sydney United, South Melbourne, all these clubs come to South Australia to verse in the National Soccer League. Talk to me about, those memories as a player, someone being around the club during those NSL days, and, how you hope to emulate that in this year's competition if you are to play one of those big historic clubs once again.
Very fortunate to have been a young man going to what was then, it's now Cooper Stadium, but was then High Marsh Stadium, and being able to witness some of these games. The passion, it's very difficult to describe. I'm an avid A-League fan, and I'll go to as many A-League games as I possibly can. there was there's a different feeling with some of those NSL games. Just this real deep passion and connection to the club, representing a community and representing the values of that community, and it spilled out onto the football pitch. It was just such a special time, I think, in Australian football. Um, to be able to, I think, rekindle that is something that we should be actively looking to do. And it's not to say that the A-League isn't doing that. I think there are some examples of some brilliant rivalries and brilliant atmospheres in the A-League. I still think there's scope to learn from our past, whilst not kind of languishing in it. What are some of the things that we can learn from, and how can we reinvigorate some of those A-League games and environments to capture the passion that existed back then? Because the truth is that some of the crowds in the A-League are absolutely not what we would want from our top professional competition. And you can see in the NPL that there are clubs, and some immediately come to mind, like South Melbourne, Preston, who are getting 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6,000 people to a game. So what is it that we can learn from, and how can we continue to coexist and have a really strong NPL whilst also bolstering the environment and the crowds and the passion within the A-League environment as well. So, it's a very, very important competition because I think there are lots of learnings from it.
Yeah, and I think, if we talk about, the Australia Cup this year, what we've seen, Preston South Melbourne tonight is expecting another blockbuster crowd. I do agree with your sentiment in where, this Australia Championship plays a pivotal role in where you could learn based off the history of Australian football, what can we bring to a modern audience, and how do we grow just football in general based off, these historic clubs and what they mean to so many people across the country.
Yeah, I think this country, it's a big country, and very big geographically. It's huge, not population-wise. That presents challenges, of course, in having a two-tier professional league. But in my opinion, that is absolutely what we need to do in this country. We need promotion and relegation. We need the NPL clubs, those ambitious NPL clubs, to know that they can, if they have the desire, the drive, the structure, the funds, that they can compete at the very highest level. I think it makes our A-League stronger. It makes interest in the game stronger. It would, I think, improve the appeal to broadcasters. Because some of those relegation promotion games, the revenue stream, I think, would be significant. I think just generally the interest, it would be good for players. We have a lot of excellent young players, and I've got many in my team who I know could go to a higher level, but the opportunities are just not there because there are not enough teams. I was listening to, I think it was an article you might have written, and David Perkovic's comments as Sutherland coach. I could not agree more with his sentiments around some of the fantastic coaches in the NPL who are doing wonderful things in running almost a professional setup, whilst also working a full-time job away from football. And yet those coaches are not able to get opportunities because there are a lack of teams as well. So not only is it good for players, for fans and communities, but it's also fantastic for coaches who have that ambition and drive, and to give them something to aspire to as well. So there are so many reasons why this second tier, national second division, is vital, and I'm just grateful that it exists now, and that we're part of it.
Vas, I couldn't have said that much better myself, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that 100% agree with your sentiments about where football is going, and what role this championship can play going into the future. I've just got one final question for you. We asked Dan Barber of Lions FC this question last week, just because there's no official groups yet of the Australia Championship, and we've talked so much about Adelaide City, the history of Adelaide City, what has transpired in the past, and what we can do in the future for the game. As head coach of Adelaide City, what would be, if you had to pick one team that you would face off against this year in the Australia Championship, who would you pick? Who would you like the FA to pair you up against, whether it be in the groups or in a quarterfinal or something like that?
South Melbourne. It's an easy.
Yeah, that is.
I think that would draw an incredible crowd. And I think I can almost visualize it. I'm getting goosebumps even talking to you about it right now. I can just imagine some of the chants, some of the, I don't know if this is even allowed, but, flares and the food, the smell of food in the background and, 5, 6, 7,000 people packed into a suburban ground. I hope this can happen. Please, if anyone's listening out there that's involved in the draw, please make that happen.
Yes, and I 100% agree. And I hope, for everyone's sake, that is in the group stages and where we get a home and away fixture with those two teams. Because, I think it's long been yearning for those two clubs to rekindle their history, their rivalry, and everything that has gone on since then.
Who did Dan say? Who was his preference for Lions?
He said Preston, Lions versus Lions.
Okay, yep.
Well, Vas, thank you very much for your time here today. That was a fantastic conversation. I'm sure there is so many more talking points we could have gone over. So I really appreciate your time. Good luck with the upcoming NPL South Australia finals competition, and I hope we speak again and run into each other come the Australia Championship later in the year.
Yeah, brilliant, Keen. I appreciate your time. Thanks again for all of your support. It does mean a lot to all of us. I speak on behalf of every NPL club. The coverage is so appreciated. A lot of people put in a lot of work, and I think you know that, and you recognise that and acknowledge that, and that means a lot to a lot of people. So thank you very much for your support as well.
Now, the Australia Cup quarterfinals wrap up tonight. However, I wholeheartedly believe this is the biggest one yet, and I am very excited to watch this one unfold. It is Preston Lions versus South Melbourne. The big show is going back onto the national stage, and there is a semi-final spot on the line. If you remember, in 2024, this was kind of the kickstart, I want to say. If you look at back over the last few years of NPL rises, I think that big show in 2024, when Preston and South Melbourne met in a preliminary round of the Australia Cup / Doherty Cup, that was a real turning point, I think, when you look at NPL clubs. They got over 9,000 at Geneseo Stadium that night. South Melbourne prevailed on the night. But I want to say that was a very big moment because the Australia Championship just been announced or rumoured around. Preston, South Melbourne, a part of that. And it just showed what could be done at this level, and I feel tonight could be another very big chapter in this storied rivalry, renewed rivalry over the past few years, especially now that Preston and South Melbourne are back on the NPL stage. They're back in the national tier stage. South Melbourne, obviously, Oz Championship winners last year. Preston have returned to years of days gone by, especially with their Doherty Cup win just a month ago. So I'm expecting a very big show and very good game tonight, especially being at Geneseo Stadium and a night game, I must say. One thing I was concerned about when I saw the pairing of this recently in the NPL Victoria, they've put the big show as a 2:30, 1:30 kickoff time on a Saturday or Sunday at Lakeside or Geneseo Stadium. One of the reasons being safety and crowd control and stuff like that. So, but again, having it at night, especially emulating that 2024 game, I think it will be a much bigger and better spectacle. I'm hoping the crowd turns up. I'm sure it will. It's a very tight, small stadium there at Geneseo Stadium, but I'm sure South Melbourne Preston fans will be coming from here, there, and everywhere across Victoria, and I'm sure there might even be some out-of-state travellers going to that game as well. But it's a game that I'm very excited for to watch tonight. It's kicking off at 7 p.m., I believe. Let me just double confirm that for you all. So it is, yes, 7:30. Apology, Paramount were advertising 7. So 7:30 kickoff. So if you're listening to this at 6 o'clock, listen to this episode and then cut over to the big show, South Melbourne Preston there. If you're listening to this after, hopefully you were able to watch that and enjoy that one. The winner of that one will play the winner of last night's quarterfinal, Lions FC. Lions convincingly defeated VPL 1 side, but also relegated down to VPL 2 side. North Sunshine Eagles 4-0 last night. 4 first half goals were enough for Dan Barber's side to get the job done. Obviously, we had Dan on the show last week talking about that game, talking about his side's remarkable season. We also did a write-up for Football 360. That article can be found on their website if you wish to read that one as well. But I thought Lions were very convincingly winners on the night. They deserved their spot in the semi-final, and it showed like the different levels. Like obviously, North Sunshine, the lowest placed team in the second tier of Victorian football. Lions, top of NPL Queensland. And I think they're a very strong side. I think whoever they face, Preston or South Melbourne, will have their work cut out for them. I believe that semi-final is down in Victoria. So that will be a first time travelling away from home for Lions in the national stages. They've been at home for all 3 of their national stage games thus far. So that will be the first time travelling, which could make things a bit more interesting for the side. However, that's going to be a cracking game. And I think, the winner of tonight's game, Preston South Melbourne, will be deservedly winners. Because, that's going to be a big fight. Everyone will be up for it. It's one of those games you want to be a part of. If you're a player, it's very easy to get up for and play your best. So the winner will deserve their spot in the semi-final. And then realistically, the winner of that semi-final, like the NPL semi-final, they will push whether it's a Melbourne Victory or Sydney FC all the way. And who knows, there might be one last cup set in the 2026 Han Australia Cup. But it's going to be good from here on out, I reckon. Like, there's some really big teams, really strong teams. Sydney FC, Melbourne Victory on the other side, that's always going to take care of itself, have big games, big rivalry. They're the Big Blue, that game, I believe, in Sydney. So it's going to be a fantastic spectacle to watch. The Australia Cup really encapsulates everything that we hope for Australian football, especially with no national pyramid and ability for these teams to play one another. It does, give a little bit of a hope, but then it's also, bittersweet as well, because I was at the Appy game last week and I thought Appy have really pushed Melbourne Victory all the way. Harry Sawyer, the difference, the former South Melbourne man, scored the lone goal on the night in extra time after it was 0-0 through 90 minutes. And I thought Appia were really good, dare I say the better team at point of time in that game. Really pushed Melbourne Victory. I don't really recall Melbourne Victory having many shots on goal, nor did Appia. But Appia did score one, ruled offside. Sean Simmons there at the back post scored one, but was ruled offside. So both sides had their chances in a very limited chance game. But the one thing I left away walking from Leichhardt Oval is that, that was a really good game. And I thought Appia matched Melbourne Victory for the most part. Though because there's no opportunity for them to play on a regular basis, we just don't know if that was a one-off or, Appia were getting better or Melbourne Victory were softer. But because it's a cup, you go, oh, Appia were really good. They really pushed Melbourne Victory. But, they won't play each other now for another 7 years, potentially. Like, that's the only irk I have. And, the cup is fantastic, but it just gives us a glimpse of what Australia football could be, and then just rips it all away and, goes back to NPL, A-League, and there's no crossover. So enjoy the last few games of the Australia Cup. It's been a fantastic 2026 Australia Cup. It's been, one of the best, I must say, in terms of the teams progressing in it, the stories that have unfolded, and I feel there is one or two more stories to unfold in this year's edition. So I'm very excited for tonight's game. If I had to give a prediction, my instinct gut is saying South Melbourne. South Melbourne beat Preston 3-0. I think last time they went to Geneseo Stadium at the start of the year, it was 0-0 in the last league game just a few months ago. Preston, yes, have improved at Geneseo Stadium as well. We'll have the home fans right behind them, but I think South are just a bit more conditioned for these big moments at the moment. Like I said in last week's pod, Oz Championship final, obviously Pro League final, Docty Cup finals. Yes, Preston have won the Docty Cup against Heidelberg a few weeks back, so that's a bit of experience for them. But I think on just these big nights, South Melbourne are made for them. It's almost, a part of the club. So that's what my gut is telling me, but I also won't be surprised if Lions get up and we have a Lions versus Lions in the semi-final. It's what Dan Barber wanted to see in the Australia Championship, but he might get that earlier in the Australia Cup. So we'll see what happens tonight and what's unfolds. But as long as it is a good game, that is all I care about as a neutral fan myself. So the final segment here, a bit more lighthearted, a bit more of a conversational style. Get your guys' opinion on it after the pod. I'll be posting, these groups on our Instagram and Twitter later in the week to get your thoughts. So make sure you comment there what you think. But it's time to do the My Dream Australia Championship groups for 2026. I sat down, put all 16 teams into the 4 groups just like it was last year in the Australia Championship, doing this Champions League format at the moment because there is no home and away fixture or schedule at the moment, or capacity for that. So we are doing these formats. So I put together my groups and you guys can let me know what you think. So the rules is that there can only be 2 foundation clubs in each group. So out of the 8 of Marconi, Sydney United, Avondale, Wollongong, Olympic, Preston, South Melbourne, and Apia. 2 of those teams had to be in each group, but no more than 2 can be in there. So consider that when you do your own. I put this on our story earlier today. We did have some few replies, but the one that stood out to me was that one person wanted to see Sutherland and Wollongong Wolves in the same group. And I must say, great minds think alike, because as I go through my list, that is one of the scenarios I have done. The reasoning for my groups before I go into reading them is last year there was a little bit of the rivalries and, renewed history. Marconi, Heidelberg, Sydney Olympic, South Melbourne, West Apia, Sydney United. There were those crossovers, but I want to lean in more to those games. I want to really get those history games going, get those rivalries on the big stage. The Derby d'Italia came in the quarterfinals against Marconi and Apia. That was a fantastic game there. South Melbourne, Heidelberg, also semi-final, Marconi, South Melbourne. I think there's some really good games there, and especially the way they do the groups. If they do the same as last year, it's not a live draw, pick a ball out of the hat and just make them as it is. The FA do predetermine them, or they did last year at least, in where they could make these fixtures come to life. And I'm hoping they take a listen at this podcast if they do listen, and make some of these fixtures happen. So in the first group for the Australia Championship, I have Marconi, Stallions, and Sydney United in the same group, being joined by Adelaide City and Canberra, Croatia. Now, you'll notice that there's a lot of ethnicity ties in that group. 2 Italian teams in Marconi and Adelaide City, and then 2 Croatian ties in Sydney United and Canberra, Croatia. The reason I did that is, like I said, lean into those derbies. Marconi, Sydney United, already established, already playing in a regular home and away season in the NPL New South Wales, the traditional derby, have set up some fantastic games this year. Sydney United, I think, won the league double over Marconi this year. I could be wrong. They definitely won the first one on the Easter Monday. But so lean into those derbies. Those fans are already there. They already hate each other. Get them into a national stage. Then you look into an older rivalry, one that's renewed on this new generation. Marconi, Adelaide City, you got those Italian ties there. Home and away, one in Adelaide, one at Marconi, will bring a fantastic Italian population to and around the ground. Sydney United, Adelaide City, another historic game, another historic matchup. They had some fantastic games back in the National Soccer League, and I think that will be one that will be very well received by those two fan bases. And then Canberra, Croatia. The Croatian fan bases are always dedicated to their clubs. I thought Canberra, Croatia were one of the surprises of the tournament last year. They pushed Avondale in that first game of the season. They performed very well, couldn't get out of the group stages. But again, you put them against Sydney United, fantastic community games in Canberra at Adenza Park. Croatian community can thrive together, play a good game of football, and then face off against Italians. There is respect there, but there is a rivalry there between the two. So that would be my first group. And again, I think that would be really fascinating to see, especially Adelaide City thrown into a group against two of their oldest and most bitter rivals. My second group is Lions FC, Sutherland Sharks, Avondale FC, and the Wollongong Wolves. So, like I said at the start of this segment, one person said they wanted Wollongong and Sutherland in the same group, as do I. Sutherland and Wollongong have been backed by a lot of people to be in the A-League for multiple years as expansion teams. Why not make that South Coast derby a thing in the Australia Championship? Why not put Sutherland and Wollongong on a national stage? Make that derby even elevated onto a national stage. Lions FC have been doing a fantastic job on the national stage already in the Australia Cup, in the NPL Queensland. Avondale already a strong team, always a strong team in NPL Victoria. I think this is a group of very ambitious clubs. Lions, Sutherland, Avondale, Wollongong all kind of share the same trajectory in where they are all building for the future. They have rich history in their region as football clubs, but they're improving into this next generation, and I think that will be a fantastic and exciting group there. The next one is Sydney Olympic, Preston Lions, South Hobart, and Broadmeadow Magic. The reason I put all these teams together is I think you could find some interesting matchups and some interesting storylines in this group. I think Preston and Broadmeadow has the easiest one in terms of that Macedonian connection. You could put them together and there'd be, again, that big community culture one. I think Preston and Sydney Olympic would be a big matchup. Yes, if you take the off-field results away from Sydney Olympic, they're still a big club with big still naming rights. I think if you have Sydney Olympic travel down to Preston, that will be a really fascinating fixture for them. Sydney Olympic and Broadmeadow played last year in the Australia Championship, so again, they get to meet each other again. And then South Hobart, one of the most unique teams in the Australia Championship, the only team from Tasmania represented in a national tournament. Preston coming down there, you got Victoria versus Tasmania, what that can do. Sydney Olympic again travelling down there. South Hobart coming up to a Newcastle in Broadmeadow Magic. And again, the other thing as well, all four of these teams competed in the Australia Championship last year, and all four were unable to get out of the group stages there. So again, it gives teams that opportunity to excel on the national stage and push further than what they have done before. And then the final group is South Melbourne, West Apia, Bayswater City, and the Oakley Cannons. Again, another big bloster group. The obvious storyline in that one is South Melbourne versus Apia. Didn't meet in last year's Australia Championship. However, when you look at progressive clubs and clubs that, are teetering on the edge of NPL and A-League, I would deem to say that those two teams are the closest, in my opinion. South Melbourne obviously have already expressed their opinion to join the A-League, and I feel if the APL were to open expression of interest to join the A-League, I feel Apia would not be too far behind with how they are run, how they operate as a football club, and how they perform on the field as well. I feel they would be up there with South Melbourne. So, home and away against South Melbourne, big showdowns there. Good group of fan bases for both those clubs, big strong identities. Having them match against each other would be great to see. Bayswater City, they were in the Australia Championship last year, back-to-back titles there in West Australia. What are they able to do? Played West Apia last year as well. What can they do against West Apia again? What can they do against Victorian opponents there. Can they do better than what they did last year? And then Oakley Cannons playing in the same group as South Melbourne. Greek ties there. Really strong, big clubs down there in Victoria, so we get that local fan bases there. And then Appia Leichhardt coming up and down from Victoria as well. Didn't travel to Victoria at all last year in the Australia Championship. So again, having them come down to Victoria, I think will be another good exposure to that market, to the club, and having them play against an Oakley will be a fantastic sight to see as well. You know, big teams against other big teams, the Premiers of New South Wales versus the Premiers of Victoria as well. So that's my groups for the Australia Championship. If there was one group I really want to see the most, it's that first group of Marconi, Adelaide City, Sydney United, Canberra, Croatia. I think that's a perfect group in my mind. But, you know, let me know what you think. Is it too much kind of thing? Would you spread them out? Would you have other teams versus other teams? Do you want other matchups? Let me know your thoughts. I'll post them maybe towards the weekend on the Instagram and Twitter. And then in the comments there, you can let me know what your thoughts are there. But that will pretty much wrap up our episode for this week. Thank you again to Vas for joining us from Adelaide City and providing his thoughts on their return to the national stage. Fantastic conversation there. We'll be back again next week with another guest interview, hopefully. Let me know who you want. We might try and branch out to non-coaches and players and just get other Australian content creators on here with their opinions. We've had Joe Kay join last year to talk about the Australia Championship. We might reach out to him again this year or get some commentators on here, especially with the finals going on across the NPL competitions. But we will be back nevertheless. If we can't get anyone, you'll just hear my lovely voice again. So again, thank you for listening. As always, the last few episodes have been received very well, and I'm always appreciative of any listens to these podcasts that there are. Until next week, have a good week. Stay healthy. Stay dry in this final week of winter. Enjoy the football, especially with the Australia Cup tonight, and then all the NPL finals action, all final day drama in New South Wales like me. But again, plenty of football to go around, and we're just getting closer and closer to the Australia Championship, and hopefully there is some news not too far in the future. So until then, I've been Kim McKenna. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.